Hi guys, I'm Rachel O'Leary, and today we're talking about the houseplant that started it all for me, African violets. Growing up, these were always in my grandmother's windowsill, and as I started my family and started spending time with my husband's family, they were always in his mother's windowsill, and I think they're just really one of the unsung heroes of the houseplant world. African violets come in tons of colors, tons of leaf shapes, tons of leaf structures, and are really just a super fun, fascinating, easy plant to grow. Now, I've had to limit myself on the amount that I have because they also like an east-facing window, and I only have one of those in my entire house. Now, if it were up to me, I'd knock out our kitchen wall and put in a giant garden window, but when we priced that out, it actually cost the same for that one window as it did for all the other windows in our house to be replaced combined. So I had to limit myself to space, as orchids have really grabbed my attention over the past few years, and since they also like that light, I've sort of focused on them. But in recent months, I've put in a multi-tiered plant wall in my living room with supplemental lighting. This has allowed me to get more violets, and I'm super excited about it because they really are one of my favorites. So today we're going to talk about growing them, keeping them, how to propagate them, and really just sort of the nuts and bolts of violets. Now again, as a disclaimer, I am not an expert. I'm not a trained professional. I am just a giant nerd who is quite enthusiastic about her plants. So let's get started. Now, one of the things I like best about violets is that it's so easy to start them from a single leaf cutting. Buying the mature plants that are already ready to flower can be a bit spendy, especially if you want some of the more interesting variants with variegation or some of the more fancy flower types like the double ruffles. So being able to buy a single leaf and have really good success growing a full plant from that is a really affordable way and space-saving way to get into these guys. Now there's tons and tons and tons of strategies for doing so. I'm just going to show you what works for me today. But first we're going to talk a little bit about where violets come from and how this is relevant to us. They come from the East African mountains, where they catch a very humid breeze from the Indian Ocean. They're often found near waterfalls and streams, where they grow in sort of pockets, little tiny pockets of soil between rocky outcroppings. So it's really humid, it's really moist, but it's a very protected area in that there's much larger plants around that filter out the sun and also keep them from sort of direct hard rainfall. So their roots are always really humid, but the leaves themselves don't get a lot of direct water. And this is important for a few reasons, which we'll talk about in a minute. Now, unfortunately, wild violets were pretty critically threatened for a while because of habitat destruction. A lot of the area there was being logged legally and illegally, and a lot of it was going over to farming, but luckily they've put into place protections for a preserve for a lot of the areas where these guys are from, so hopefully they'll be safe long term. Excuse me, cat. Now these guys are a low-growing, sprawling plant, and I think this makes them especially well suited for us to keep in our homes. The way that they grow is important to us for a few reasons. I think it's easiest and best for them to water them from below, meaning instead of pouring from the top, you water them from the bottom. Understanding how they grow helps us choose our soil composition. Now I'm cheap, as I mentioned, by buying leaves, but I also like to mix my own soils, and this is because by keeping just a few raw materials on hand, you can cater your mix to what the plant needs, and it really makes life way easier in the long run. For violets, I most often do a 50-50 mix of coconut coir, which is renewable unlike peat, and perlite for a light, airy composition that will really hold the moisture well. I also like to use these violet pots, especially for the large plants. I'll show you those in a moment. But again, mixing your own soil is a really easy way to sort of control the amount of humidity that the plant gets, as well as the drainage. Now, if I'm keeping them in a pot like this one, with just a standard small nursery pot, I put them in a dish of water and let them sit in that dish for about an hour. And then just wait until they're totally dry and do it again. It's usually once a week or so that I water them. After a while, you'll be able to pick up the plant and see if it feels light or not. And if it feels light, it's time to water. But I do find that that's the best way to water these guys. Now, I do like these violet pots for larger plants. You just fill the bottom with water and then the water seeps through the terracotta into it. I know they're not everybody's favorite, but this particular plant has been in this particular pot for over 10 years. And it's really thriving. Now, it's actually a whole bunch of plants that I could split, but I'm apprehensive about disrupting it, as African violets don't really like to be repotted. So it's best to sort of let them be or nip those sucker plants in the bud from the beginning. Personally, I like how this one looks sort of all wild and chaotic rather than low like that one, so I've left it. Now, for doing leaf cuttings, you just want to pick a really nice, healthy leaf. Have a nice pair of really sharp scissors, trim off the leaf, and simply put it into the dirt. Now, what's important when you're trying to get a baby plant to grow is that you maintain a level of humidity. Most people would do this just in a plastic container, but I have all of these glass cloches around, so I just put them in there, making sure that the soil is staying humid. And usually after about 4 to 6 weeks, you'll see a baby plantlet grow. Now, only my largest plant was received as a full-on plant. The rest of my violets I've grown from leaf cuttings. It's also a really great way to be able to share your plants with other people. I've sent them to lots of friends over the years, and I tend to start multiples of my favorite plants in order to be able to have them for trade or to share later on. So this is why I think African violets are one of the best houseplants out there. They don't take up much space, they're easy to grow, they're beautiful, there's a huge diversity, there's a leaf color, a leaf structure, or a flower type for everyone. And really, as long as you pay attention to their needs, they get very easy to grow. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.